Hi there and welcome to the channel of A Disappointed Man with me, Jason Kennedy, the Disappointed Man. And in this video I'll be talking about Edith Nesbit's 1907 children's novel, The Enchanted Castle, which I read in this Barnes & Noble edition. You can access this freely online, link in the description. Now before I come on to the story itself, as is traditional, let's have a few words about our author. Edith Nesbit was born in 1858 into an affluent family, but her childhood was extremely unsettled. Firstly, her father passed away when she was just 4 years of age, and then her elder sister Mary developed consumption. Seeking a more favourable climate for Mary's illness, the family then spent 6 years on the continent, chiefly in France, only returning to England after Mary's death, with Edith now 17 years old. In the next few years, two key events occurred. Firstly, Edith met Hubert Bland, whom, after falling pregnant by, she married. This was a tumultuous relationship. Bland's extramarital activities produced another child, and in the end led to the formation of an extremely unorthodox household, with Edith and Bland's children living alongside his children by another woman, Alice Hodson, who herself served as housekeeper. The other development was the beginning of Nesbit's literary career, which began at the age of 20 when she had several of her poems accepted for publication. In the first 2 decades of her career, Nesbit focused on producing poetry, children's storybooks and short stories, and it was only around the turn of the century she began publishing the children's novels for which she is now remembered. First came The Story of the Treasure Seekers, which spawned a series, then 5 Children and It, which also engendered a series, and then standalone novels such as The Railway Children, her most celebrated work, and The Enchanted Castle, to which we will shortly be turning our attention. One final aspect of Nesbit's life that merits mention is her political activism. An ardent admirer of William Morris, she was an early adopter of socialist principles and, as a founding member of the Fabian Society, had contact with the leading intellectuals of the day, including a brief dalliance with George Bernard Shaw. As you can see, a fascinating life, and if you're interested in finding out more, I recommend Julia Briggs' excellent biography, link in the description below. And now, as promised, let's turn our attention to the Enchanted Castle. The story begins with 3 siblings, Gerald, Jimmy and Kathleen, being obliged, due to circumstances beyond their control, to spend the summer at Kathleen's empty girls' school under the care of a benevolent French mistress. By the end of chapter 1, the children have discovered a secret underground passage that leads into the grounds of what they dub the Enchanted Castle. Further exploration takes them to the entrance of a maze where they find a thread, and following this, they are led to the centre where they find upon a bench a figure reclining that looks for all the world like a sleeping princess. After a brief yet heated discussion over the potential consequences of kissing sleeping girls, Jimmy steps forward and plants a kiss on the sleeping beauty's cheek, who duly awakens and leads the siblings into the castle, and here begins a very artful sequence as a game of make-believe is interrupted by the discovery that genuine magic is at work in the shape of a magic ring, and it's now that the story begins in earnest. The following chapters are rather episodic in nature and centre on the children's attempts to understand just how the ring works. It passes from finger to finger, with each child making a wish, and these tend to produce unforeseen consequences, sometimes downright alarming in nature, foremost of which is the advent of the Ugly Wugglies. And I'll just provide you with a sample of quite how awful the Ugly Wugglies are. The speaker had no insight to his head. Gerald had the best of reasons for knowing it. The speaker's coat had no shoulders inside it, only the crossbar that a jacket is slung on by careful ladies. The hand raised in interrogation was not a hand at all. It was a glove, lumpily stuffed with pocket handkerchiefs, and the arm attached to it was only Kathleen's school umbrella. Yet the whole thing was alive, and was asking a definite, and for anybody else, anybody who really was a body, a reasonable question. Rather horrible, I'm sure you'll agree. Now this fugitive Ugly Wuggly haunts the rest of the novel, just as the inspiration haunted Nesbit's dreams, and is only extinguished in amusing fashion at the very conclusion of the novel. Given that each episode is triggered by the children's wishes, they tend to be rather scattershot in nature. However, because the bulk of the action takes place in the castle and its grounds, Nesbit very skillfully uses each of these mini-adventures to disclose new secrets of the Enchanted Castle, and it's this that draws us deeper and deeper into a fantasy and prepares us for the later chapters where there are scenes of pure imagination. And I just wish to touch upon two aspects of this. The grounds of the garden abound with statuary of two types. Firstly, we have dinosaur sculptures and then figures from classical culture. And if this seems an extremely improbable combination, indeed it is, but it directly relates to Nesbit's childhood visits to the relocated Crystal Palace at Sydenham, where she was able to observe the wonders of the Greek court and the dinosaur sculptures in the gardens, which are still there today. Moreover, if one is wearing the ring, these statues come alive at night, and in one scene, Kathleen, for reasons we need not go into, is inside a dinosaur when it comes alive and decides to go for a swim in the lake, and the moonlit grandeur of this sequence strongly recalls a similar episode in Conan Doyle's The Lost World, published just a few years later. The second scene, which takes up the entirety of chapter 10, is an absolutely outstanding example of imaginative writing and centers upon a night spent with the Greek gods. Naturally, these gods are a source of wisdom, and the information they disclose prepares the path for the story's resolution, the most predictable aspect of which is the reuniting of the long-lost lovers. Yet even here, Nesbit's powers of invention retain their capacity to surprise, and her treatment of magic provides a paradoxical yet extremely satisfying climax. Okay, time for my analysis. I'm going to touch upon 4 points, 3 in favour of this novel and 1 in which I highlight its most glaring weakness. Firstly, the writing, and here it's all about the tone, which, while typically light and humorous, at critical moments in the story takes on an atmosphere of wonder, of majesty, even of awe, and it's this blend of the humorous and the magical which produces moments which can only fairly be described as sublime. Secondly, the novel incorporates meta-narrative in a very amusing way. Gerald is familiar with the discourse of children's literature from his own reading, and he provides a commentary on the story's action as it takes place, and the best way to demonstrate this is with a very brief quote. "It's a cave," said Kathleen. "The young explorers," explained Gerald, blocking up the hole of entrance with his shoulders. "Dazzled at first by the darkness of the cave, could see nothing." "Darkness doesn't dazzle," said Jimmy. "I wish we'd got a candle," said Kathleen. "Yes, it does," Gerald contradicted. "Could see nothing." But their dauntless leader, whose eyes had grown used to the dark, while the clumsy forms of the others were bunging up the entrance, had made a discovery. Oh, what? Both the others were used to Gerald's way of telling a story while he acted it, but they did sometimes wish that he didn't talk quite so long and so like a book in moments of excitement. He did not reveal the dread secret to his faithful followers till one and all had given him their word of honour to be calm. "We'll be calm, all right," said Jimmy impatiently. "Well then," said Gerald, ceasing suddenly to be a book and becoming a boy, "there's a light over there. Look behind you." The Enchanted Castle is entirely free of the kind of moralizing one often finds in children's fiction of this period. If it does seek to improve its readers, it does so through extensive references to other works of literature, any of which might spark the curiosity of a child, and I found this wish on the part of Nesbit to share her love of reading both praiseworthy and rather touching. Now for the weakness, and it's a rather glaring one, and that is the extremely flat nature of the characters in the Enchanted Castle. The dialogue is instrumental, typically centering on intergroup disagreements and featuring a considerable amount of teasing, with each character having a disposition that rarely shifts. Thus, Gerald is bossy and verbose, Jimmy is skeptical and occasionally impulsive, Kathleen is the peacemaker, and Mabel is prone to petulance, and the repeated arguments that this conflict of traits is wont to produce becomes rather wearisome over the course of the novel. A further consequence of the flatness of the characters is, of course, that they show absolutely no signs of development over the course of the story, despite all the amazing experiences they've had, and for this reason, The Enchanted Castle, despite its many pleasures, simply cannot be compared in terms of its substance with a work such as Frances Hodgson Burnett's The Secret Garden, which I previously reviewed for the channel. So there we have it, a flawed yet highly enjoyable slice of fantasy, and if you should go so far as to check it out, it would be wonderful if you could come back and report on your experience in the comments. But for now, all that remains is for me to bid you farewell, so be safe, be strong, and I shall see you anon. Nanu nanu.